Savvy Central Radio, drawing out the best from our guest with your host, Christina Nitchman.
Hello everyone and welcome to Savvy Central Radio. This is your host, Christina Nitchman. Each week, Savvy runs weekly broadcasts providing entrepreneurs and successful individuals a platform to express their dreams, hopes, lessons learned, expertise, and wisdom with the world. Our guest today is Naomi Hattaway, relocation expert on reintegrating back into the U.S. Naomi founded Eighth and Home because she believes strongly that real estate is more than just a transaction and you are more than a number. Relocation is more than just a corporate package and relocation specialist assignment. She's passionate about creating an environment where real estate professionals can be supported, learn from others, and be a rock star inside their passion. Find out more at the number 8, THAND, home.com. Hi, Naomi. Welcome to Savvy Central Radio. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks so much for having me.
I'm really happy to have you come out and talk about something we've actually never talked about on our show, and that's real estate. You're in the real estate arena. You focus on serving families who've moved all over the world and who are now integrating back into the United States. How did this all come about for you working with this particular niche?
The way it came to be is because our family personally went through some of those struggles that families who move all over the world face. And our family, we lived a couple of states in the United States of America, and then we moved to New Delhi, India, and we also moved to Singapore. And just in those moves, I really came to, it just really came clear to me that there was a missing gap of services that weren't being provided by the relocation companies and by the realtors that we personally had worked with. And so I just decided to see what I could do to help fill that gap.
Wow, living in Singapore, that must have been interesting.
It was. Yeah. It was. Singapore was only for 1 year. We lived in New Delhi, India for 3 years. So the combination, we were gone for 4 years, but both places were incredible.
Wow. Are you part of a military family, or it's just that you moved there for work or whatever?
We moved as part of the private sector. My husband's in aviation, and so
Neat.
Yeah, he's a former Marine, but we weren't married when he was still active duty. Mm-hmm. And military actually holds a special place in our heart. We give back 25% of our commissions when we work with clients who are military or fire or police. Mm-hmm. But we did not move abroad as a military family. We were with a corporation.
Wow. So this is a really interesting topic because I'm sure a lot of people, whether they're in business or in the military or whatever the purposes might be, that they actually end up moving abroad for a while. What are some of the obstacles that face families that actually end up moving back to the United States?
It's interesting. This is a topic that I end up speaking with people on almost every day, and it's kind of crazy. There's so much effort that's put into the initial moving. When you move from your home, whether you're an American citizen and you move abroad, or you live in London and you move abroad, when you make that first transition, it's exciting, and there's usually someone helping you with that transition. You kind of go overboard in your preparation. If you've got children, you get books from the library, you study up on the culture, you probably read blogs. So when you get to that location, even though you can't really prepare for it, you still feel like you've done all of the legwork. When you move back home, what I find is that you kind of think that you know what you're getting into. You know how to live at home. You know where you're going back to. And there's a huge phenomenon when the word is called repatriating. And when you repatriate, it's often a really, really hard thing to do because everyone else that you've left, they've moved on with their lives. You have seen a lot more of the world than they might have, and so your perspective on life is different. And so that was when we ourselves moved home. It took me about a year to really adapt back to living in the States, and so that's why it became so important for me to be able to reach out and help other families during that process.
Wow, that's interesting, Naomi. For me, it reminds me when I had stayed in Puerto Rico. Now, this is only a 2-month stint where I was studying and living abroad. Well, that's not that far abroad, but still, I was actually speaking and living in Spanish. And, it's a very laid back atmosphere compared to New York City. And the weird thing is, the day I got back, my roommate took me to a club downtown, and I just felt totally like shocked, like culture shock. It was like, going from living in the laid back hills and whatever and chilled out beaches of Puerto Rico to, oh my gosh, lights and noise and everything. It was really, really intense. And I felt like I had to just stay inside for a couple of weeks just to get regrouped.
Totally. And there's a group of us that all are on Facebook, and everyone talks a lot about when you come back to the United States, even to go grocery shopping, and you stand in front of this massive aisle of toothpaste, even can just be completely overwhelming. The other part that really seems to impact families is when they've got children and they move back into a public school setting. If they've gone to international schools, it's a really different, there's a whole different components of learning and education and how teachers operate. And my daughter actually had her teacher here in the States tell me that she was concerned because she didn't know her U.S. currency, she didn't know her U.S. geography, and sure didn't know her U.S. presidents. And I said, well, that's because, of course, she lived overseas during the years that she would have learned that. And her teacher informed me that she hadn't shared that with her. So I see it a lot with children that they kind of intentionally do not tell that part of their life story that they moved abroad because it's sometimes just too confusing to explain to people when you get back. So,
and that brings me to mind, probably they don't want to be ostracized as being different. So let me just pretend and fit in and I'm just like everyone else. So let me not tell them I've been somewhere else where I might be construed as a different person.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it also depends on whether you're moving back to the home that you left or whether you're moving to a different location altogether. We moved back to a new location. So as long as you treat that situation like a new adventure and like a new assignment, I think you have a little bit better chance of adjusting quicker. But for the families that move back to the same neighborhood, to the same school, and sometimes to the same home, there's a lot of extra steps that should be taken in that situation to really be able to settle in well.
Well, what would you suggest for kids in particular? Now that you were mentioning your daughter, I'm thinking I've talked to quite a few people who, because they are entrepreneur, they actually can travel and live half the year in, say, Costa Rica or something, and then they come back to the United States. How do you help your kids transition from that experience of being abroad?
I think it's important. I think the biggest thing is really just to have open dialogue. If you are going to be going from another culture, another country, back to your passport country, I think that the more you can talk about it and have open discussions, the better. In our family, because I really didn't think it was going to be hard to move back home, we didn't talk about it. We didn't talk about anything deeper than just that we would have jet lag. And I think I did a real disservice to them at the time. So lots of open communication. I think it's super important to find other people in the area that have also lived overseas. Nothing feels worse than someone not wanting to hear your story and your experiences. And so when you have children that have lived in places with amazing things and have seen, wonderful things, to come to the United States, a lot of the new neighbor children are not going to want to hear about the elephants that they rode for their birthday party, the 7 wonders of the world that they got to see. So if you can find other people who are like you in that they've moved abroad, that can help with the acclimation back. And then I think the other piece of it is to, into your new community, bring some of the global experiences that you had. If you're at an elementary school, volunteer to hold a passport party where people come and set up tables about different cultures and different countries, just to give your kids an idea that they too can bring some of what they experienced back to their new home.
I love that portion that you just mentioned, integrating and sharing your experiences, because I can imagine coming back and you share some of the experiences. Even I, living in Puerto Rico, it's not all that different, but it's a very much slower life, much slower pace, not all this hectic that you've got in the city. And you come back here and you start sharing your experiences. Some people might not be open to it. They may be open to it. But what's really awesome is having a party, sharing the different foods, the different customs, and getting people integrated and experiencing it and seeing how cool it can be to experience different cultures.
I agree. I totally agree. And it doesn't even have to be where you're sharing just something that's your own heritage. You could get people to just pick a place and, all bring to kind of a potluck party. The other really fun thing, if there's not children, because I know I just talked a lot about kids, people used to do progressive dinners where you would start at one home for drinks and then you'd go to the next home for appetizers and the following home would be the first course. You could totally do something fun like that too, to just kind of bring it all back to a bite-sizable event where different neighbors take on a different country and prepare food and drink and decorations. Just another way to be able to share your experiences from living overseas without it being pushy or non-interesting.
I like the mention of community, because what is missing a lot all over the United States, and I don't know about the rest of the world, but I know here a lot, where a lot of our communities have become disengaged with TV and gadgets and gadgets, and we have become disengaged from each other. And it's awesome to have something like that where you can come together as a community and do something fun, and at the same time learn and appreciate other cultures. That's a really neat thing.
That is, yeah, and it's you bringing that up reminds me also about one of the things that's become really a big pillar in our business. When you've moved overseas, a lot of times your community is right there waiting for you, almost with arms open. It feels sometimes like when you land in that foreign country, because not everyone else, the other expat community knows what it feels like to be new, and they kind of just wrap you up and envelop you, and you've got instant friends. When you come back, however, that's not the case. And so we try really hard with the families that we work with to identify what in their past communities, what were the things and how did it feel and what types of people and what kinds of markets and what made their families feel really connected and able to thrive. And then we try and find a place that can help recreate that a little bit so they're not plopping themselves down into a neighborhood where people don't wave at each other when they pull out of their garage, where there are block parties in the summer, just to try and recreate a little bit of that community and that sense of neighborhood that you're right. It's completely missing from most of our areas now.
Yeah. Yeah. And this is a great way to bring it back. And you mentioned something that brought back to what my grandma said. She grew up in New York City in the Upper East Side. And she said, when I was a kid, we used to sleep on the fire escape and it was totally safe. I
love that.
Yeah, and you would just and another part that I thought was very interesting, on Sunday you taught kind of doing I forgot how you called it, where you go from neighbor to neighbor and you share.
Dinner, yeah.
Progressive dinner. Well, they didn't quite do that, but all the neighbors in New York City at that time kind of all knew each other in the neighborhood. It was called Yorkville was like Germantown or something.
Okay.
So all the neighbors were mostly German, and my heritage is German. So everyone knew each other. And so on Sunday after church, all the doors of all the neighbors would be open and people would just come knocking or just walking in. You'd leave your door wide open and they'd come in, have a drink, sit down, talk, have impromptu concert because many of them played instruments. And I was like, wow, are we still talking about New York City here?
So incredible. And
look how awesome that is. I think we should think about bringing that back into our now society. How cool would that be to spend? Yeah, that would be fab. And we mentioned prior to the interview talking a little bit about how many spouses become the trailing spouse. And for anyone out there who doesn't know what that means, share what that means and what are some of those challenges faced by those spouses.
Right. So it's actually funny because if you talk to anyone in the expat live abroad spectrum, the term trailing spouse makes everyone cringe. It's the term that has been used for ages to describe the non-working spouse, which traditionally is the female, the wife. And most women really, really despise that as a title. So people have been trying to get new ideas without much luck yet. But typically it really just is described as the non-working spouse. And nowadays, a lot of the trailing spouses are entrepreneurs. They're finding things that they can do. They're finding businesses they can start that they can take with them from location to location. And I think that's helping to bridge the gap of some of those challenges. Because one of the big things that I think happens is that you, as the non-working spouse, have been asked to give up your career to follow your partner for their career. So I think that always my advice for the non-working spouse is that if you're giving up your career, do one of two things. Find a really amazing place that you can volunteer, and then consider, starting a business, starting something that's an entrepreneurial venture that you could potentially pack in your suitcase and take with you to the next spot.
I love that suggestion because we were just talking about how our society often has become disengaged, but the positive side of that is that all the modern technology has allowed people to build businesses right out of their home with their computer or even their smartphone and do business on the run. So that has been one of the positive effects of modern society. And I like that you mentioned that because many of the listeners and past guests actually started their business that way. They were stay-at-home mom and their husband's out and about doing a job or a corporate job, and they decided, hey, I want to do something that's mine, and they built their own business.
Right. Yep. That's absolutely, it's so possible. And like you said, technology just makes it that much easier.
Yeah. And when you go overseas, because I'm wondering, since you've traveled to some countries like Singapore and India, is it harder in some places to actually do a business, an online business? Is there less internet access? I mean, what is it like not being in the United States as far as that goes?
Well, Singapore, pretty much, there weren't a whole lot of struggles as far as internet access and that kind of thing. But India, we did have more of an internet access issue. And each country is going to be different too, just in terms of whether you are allowed as a foreigner, and then in some countries, take it a step further, and a foreign female, whether you're able to run a business. So that would be something to make sure that your listeners investigate if that was something that was of interest, just to make sure that there aren't any country regulations or city laws that would prohibit a foreigner from running a business. But as far as the access to internet, I mean, it's come so far. When we first lived in both India and Singapore, we would have to use I'm not going to remember what it's called. The program was called Tunnel Bear, that would allow us to watch United States programming on our television, because at the time everything was just in Hindi, which wasn't very enjoyable for our kids. Yeah, it wasn't too bad. There's places that one could live that I'm sure would be more difficult as far as accessibility. But India and Singapore weren't too bad.
Yeah. And how was your experience moving abroad with the natives in any country you lived in? Were you very much accepted in most times or not? Or how did it work out for you?
Well, for us, when we lived in Delhi, our kids went to the American school, and you can do one of a couple of things. You can choose to try and integrate as a foreigner living abroad and really, rub elbows with the people whose country you're borrowing for a while as your home. Or you can kind of live in a bubble. And I see a lot of both. But what I see about the people that choose to live in a bubble, meaning only go to the restaurants that serve food that their families are accustomed to, only going to parties and events of other expats and not of people from their host country, you just miss out on so much. When I was in India, one of the things that I loved doing was working as a volunteer to teach English to children that lived in the slum across from our kids' school. And it was one of the most rewarding and rich experiences just to be able to spend that time every week with families. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter how our house is compared or what we had for dinner, but to just be able to sit with a child and his parents and be able to help to change his future was really impactful. But I do think you have to make a conscious effort if you go abroad to not just stay inside the bubble and to go a little bit outside of it to really get the full experience.
Yeah. And I can imagine, I mean, even for myself staying in Puerto Rico for 2 months, there are times you just want to hide out where you
Yeah.
know that people that speak your language, it just feels comfortable. But yeah, you're right. Once you get out, because I was actually working there, so you're forced to hang out and speak the language and get in the culture. But you get so much enriching in your life by doing that, by participating and being part of it. And I'm guessing that because of all these experiences living abroad is why you decide to take this niche when growing your real estate business. What was some of the hurdles you had to overcome while getting your business up and going?
It's funny because when I first read that question, I thought, I really haven't had any hurdles because it's been such a passion and kind of at the same time a pain point for me. We've moved 13 times and so it's kind of like we've really experienced the good and the bad and the ugly of moving, and to be able to take all of that experience and wrap it up into a business to provide other people with an opportunity to not have those things happen has been exciting. But what I did realize, one of the biggest hurdles is actually myself. I often take on way more than I should, and I found myself rapidly spiraling downward into I didn't have enough hours in the day. I wasn't giving enough time to my family, not enough time to my husband. I was trying to do everything and just gangbusters. So about 3 months ago, I had to really dial it back. I brought 2 amazing women to work alongside me. So we're now the 8th and home team. We all have a different set of strong suits that we really bring to the table. So that's I guess the biggest hurdle was truly myself and trying to do it all myself, because I don't think that it's possible to grow a really great business if you don't have some people alongside you to help in different capacities.
That is a really awesome tip there, Naomi. And I've heard it over and over again from small business owners and I think it's also a thing that women have in this country in particular, is that we want to be the super mom. We want to be able, or super woman, and be able to do everything, keep the house up, have the kids do all their stuff and take them here, there, and everywhere, and run a business, be a great wife. And it does take a toll because there are so many hours in a day, and you have to nurture yourself if you want to not be on empty and be able to give.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. And I think I was going to piggyback on what you said about we have such a mentality in our culture to be busy, 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 and to make sure everyone's happy and kids are at their activities and dinner is healthy and the house is picked up. And I think that all of that stuff can be important. But especially if you're an entrepreneur and you're running your own business, you don't have to hire someone to help with those things, but just bring someone along that can at least act as a shoulder or a listening ear, a sage counsel. And then, truth be told, we're about a week away from hiring someone to come clean our house, because that's one thing I just can't keep on top of.
And that's a good point there too, Naomi. It doesn't have to be a full-time or part-time staff per se. There's a number of organizations like Fiverr where you can just hire someone for short tasks. And then household work. Hey, I'm all with you there. I'm so ready to hire someone to help clean my house.
Yes.
Yeah, that is a really great tip. So remember that, no one has to do it themselves, and all the bits and pieces. Like I send my laundry out. I do not want to sit there for 3 hours doing laundry. No.
Yep, I hear you.
Yeah. So what is the big vision for your business going forward?
We have several different legs to our business and our business goals. One of them is to really grow our local real estate in terms of working with families that are ready to really find, like we talked about earlier, the community where their family can really thrive. You can put a plant or a flower or a house plant in a lot of different places and they'll kind of thrive. But if you get a plant in the right dirt, in the right soil, with the right sun, that plant blossoms and flourishes and thrives. And that's how we see the clients that we work with, is really being able to drill home with them, dig deep into what their family needs. So on a local level, that's one of our big goals, is to just continue to find those clients who really can use our services. From an international standpoint, our big goal would just be to be able to reach out to, on an embassy level, to help start the process with families before it's too late. Help get them acclimated to coming home before they get into the feelings of despair and being depressed and being frustrated, even if that's just education. We put community before commission always. And if we can be of help to somebody, that's what makes us happy to put our head in our pillow And then a kind of a secret goal that I haven't shared with many people. I would love to disrupt the relocation company industry a little bit. They seem to forget that there's a family on the other side of their HR discussions and their decisions. And typically it's all about the employee. And I just think that it's time that they start spending a little bit more money and a little bit more time on the family that goes along with that relocating employee.
That is a fabulous point. I never would have thought of that, but how true is that? I mean, I've heard of so many places where my husband's been shipped off here or there or whatever. I go along or we lose his job, and it's like a six-figure salary we're going to lose. So it's not like you're even given an option.
Right.
And who cares if your kids are ripped out of school and all their friends are going to be left behind? And yeah, and one thing that I want to piggyback on what you just said there is I think a good disruptor for all corporations, huge corporations out there, is to really take more time to value your employees, period. Because I find often they're like, you're just a number. We can get a new one of you. But hey, every time you have to get a new employee because that one quit or you fired them or let them go, I think it costs 7 times the salary to get them up to date for the 7 months. Like you're losing 7 months of salary.
Yeah. Yep. If they would spend more time successfully relocating a family along with the employer, they would have less retention issues. A happy family oftentimes helps to create a happy employee. And yeah, it needs to be flipped on its side a little bit, I think. The other piece of that too is that a lot of times relocation companies assign a realtor to a family. And in our experience, most of our realtors that we were assigned had never moved outside of their hometown. So when you're dealing with a family who has so many things on their plate and so many different moving mechanisms and parts to their move, you need someone who's actually done it themselves or at least has that empathy and compassion to understand all of the moving parts. So yeah, I could talk about that forever.
Well, I think that's why your real estate company is the perfect one for anyone to go to if they're going to move abroad or come back into the United States. But also, I just want to mention, because we were hitting how employees and HR departments should pay attention to their employees, here's another piece of it. If you treat your employees awesome, they treat your customers awesome, and hence you make more money. Win-win.
Absolutely. And it seem like it's kind of obvious, but apparently corporations, I think, have so many hoops to jump through for any change to happen. But I'd like to trailblaze that a little bit in the rest of the year and into 2016. So it'll be interesting.
That's fabulous. And I want you to give everyone in the audience before we leave here where they can contact you, find out more about you, and if they're ready to move and need help, how can they find out more information on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So our website is eighthandhome.com, and it's a little hard. It's not the word eighth. It's just the number 8, and home.com. If any one of your listeners finds themselves in a situation where they are someone who has moved abroad back and forth and then now is at home, we have a Facebook group that's got several thousand people in it called I Am a Triangle. And it's just a really great place to be and to be understood and to be heard. People ask questions all the time. And then it's like a big group of friends that are there to support and hold you up. So anyone who's repatriated or is considering a move abroad, it's a great place to be.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Naomi. Before we head on out, is there any parting words you'd like to leave with our audience?
Well, thank you, Christina, for having me. I think just one thing to just share is wherever you find yourself, whether you're moving or you're still living in the same house you grew up in, friendships and relationships matter so much. And even if you feel that you're full with your friendships and relationships, there's probably always one more person that you could touch by making yourself available. And on the flip side, if you're needing some more in the way of relationships and friendships, put yourself out there. The world is small. You'll find that you have more in common with people than you think you do. Yeah, relationships matter. That's one of the things that we use as our daily mantra in our house.
Wow, I love that last tip there because I've heard so many people say, and here's a funny thing, living in New York City, I hear more and more how lonely people are because you can be surrounded by thousands of people. If you're not reaching out, you're going to be alone. And it's not that hard. It's going to be a teeny bit uncomfortable at first, but once you do, it's going to be awesome because you're going to meet a new person that can be part of your life.
Exactly. Absolutely.
I want to thank you again, Naomi, for coming to Savvy Central Radio and sharing your gifts and talents.
Thank you, Christina.
Join our mailing list today by texting Savvy Radio to find out about upcoming guests and events and receive a free gift, how podcasting can help increase sales and influence in your business.
Savvy Central Radio is home to over 100,000 listeners per month globally and runs in syndication on 8 AM and FM platforms, including iHeartRadio and 6 podcasting platforms. To find out more about our paid sponsorship opportunities or to become a guest and find out how we can help you get your message out to the world, call 718 area code 713-2289 or email at savvycentralradio@gmail.com.